Okay, so have you ever watched a program on TV and then gone into work the following day and your perception of that program is different to the person that you've been to? We've all been in that situation before. It might be a sporting event, depending on what team you follow. So one person follows one team, one the other. So your perception of the decision by the referee is going to be different depending on whether it's penalty or not a penalty, depends on who you support, and so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the communication model. So we look at sensory input. The sensory input we receive from our environment can be quite overwhelming. We're overwhelmed receiving information, okay. Our sensory input, it's vast, it requires interpretation by our brains, and this interpretation allows us to process in greater depth elements that are most important to us and most interesting and applicable. Okay, so we'll look at the NLP Communication model, which is a really, really good model in NLP, and we'll go into more detail. So the NLP Communication model illustrates how the human brain receives, stores, transmits data, and how we represent the external world. Okay, we all got our own unique experience of the world. According to the Hungarian psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, in the book Flow, 1996, he talked about the brain being exposed to about 2 million pieces of information per second. Okay, research now suggests it's more like 12 million, if not 20. Okay, every second being processed through our senses. Okay, so I think every time I click finger, you're processing information through your senses, and that we don't need all the information to function well. You don't need to process all those 2 million to 12 million, as they now know, to achieve our goals in general. Now, goals being, when you sit down on a chair, the touch receptors all over your body where your clothes are constantly in contact with the chair and constantly being activated. And this information is going to your brains, but it doesn't make sense to be constantly aware of the receptors. So if I say, can you feel your back on the chair, your feet on the floor? Not until I mention it, because your brain has a way of blocking it out. Okay, and we process through our 5 senses. The senses being see, hear, feel, touch, and smell. Okay, and the key thing to think about here is that now we must extract information that's important to us. And this could be, for example, if I decide at break time to stand up and go and grab a cup of coffee, looking for some sugar, a coffee, a cup, so that's sort of goal-directed behaviour in that sense. But then it could be a crucial task, okay? If you're sitting on a chair and it became too hot, for example, okay? To have that sense of awareness to know when the car's coming too close to us, to activate, whether a smell has entered the environment and it could be toxic, or perhaps a loud bang in the background is something more intimate, dangerous. So the brain can extract information, but you've got these sort of pieces flowing through every second. Okay, streaming through our see, hear, feel, our touch receptors, smell and taste. Now I mentioned before that according to Mihaly, we're exposed to 2 million bits of information, but we're going to process 134 pieces. Albeit research now says it's more like 12 million pieces. So the brain is capable of processing 134 pieces of info per second. So let's use this for an example. Let's say, for example, I've got let's say you got 134 jelly babies in here. Okay, so 134 jelly babies in here. If I was to empty them out and pass them to you, do you think you could fit them into your hand? 134? Give or take, you more than likely could. And if I sort of kept passing them every second, okay, if I passed them and then you'd pass them across and you'd pass them across and you'd pass them across and so on and so forth, you could manage that, one would think. So you got 134 jelly babies or whatever it is that want to pass down in that respect. So I could pass them every second, albeit it might be slightly overwhelming to choose which flavour you want. The bottom line is you could literally put them in your hand and pass them along. Could you imagine if I gave you 12 million? Would that be hard? Definitely. And how long would it be if I gave you 12 million before the pile went so high and just the whole room was flooded with jelly babies or whatever it is I'm passing down. So the brain needs to process. So really, what is reality anyway? What is perception anyway? So your reality is different to my reality. What you pay attention to is different to what I pay attention to. Okay? There's various variations of the course that I'm delivering based on your own reality to a point. So the brain is capable of processing 134 pieces. Okay? And that's important. We're going to sort of touch on that as we go along this morning. Okay? So we receive the information, it's streaming through our senses, it enters our neurology through all our input channels. We use a series of filters to screen information. Okay, so we screen information. So that 134, you screen. Okay, you delete, distort, and generalize the information that's coming in. Okay, and that's one way to decide what we pay attention to, how we pay attention to it. Okay, so deletion could be, let's say for example, I was to sort of say, catch this. If I threw that across to you to catch it, what would you be focusing on? The item I throw across, precisely. You'd be focused on that. Or if I was to say, shuffle this, and if you don't mind catching it. Okay, so there we go. Good catch. Good catch. Fantastic. Fantastic catch. So I'll grab it for you. So great catch. So in order to catch that, pretty much everything's deleted. A lot of things are deleted. You probably wouldn't have noticed this, you wouldn't notice whatever. You're focusing pure, like a tennis serve. The person who's receiving is focused on the ball, just deleting. When I used to play professional sport, I'd have people come and visit me and watch me play, and they'd say, you didn't say hello, I was in the crowd, I didn't see them. And I know from being a coach, you don't even see them, you're so oblivious. You delete that, okay? You're so focused on what you're doing. So just like catching that, you're so focused, you're probably not aware of this, that and the other, because the brain is focusing on what it needs to focus on. Okay? Like now, I could mention your feet on the floor, your back on the chair. Until I mention that, you're probably not aware of it. I brought it to your conscious awareness. Okay? The sound of the projector, you probably deleted that until I mentioned that. Now, you're aware of it because I brought it to your conscious awareness. And now I'll get you to do an exercise, if you don't mind. What I'd like you to do is we have a bit of a competition here. See how many things in the room, items in the room, you can spot that are red. Okay. See how many things you can sort of spot in the room. I want to look for as many. Take a look in the room and see how many things you can spot in the room that are red. Okay. As many things you can see that are red in this room. Okay. Okay. And now, if you're comfortable enough to do so, if you just want to, close your eyes just for a few seconds, and I want you to think about how many blue things you noticed. Okay. Okay, and in your own time, in your own pace, you can sort of come back to the here and now. Who struggled to pick up after you focus so much on the red? Did anyone sort of struggle? Yeah, because you're so focused on that, you deleted it. Okay, it's like this video one time. I don't know if you've seen it, but there was a video one time when maybe I'll bring it up on the course at some point where I think they're playing basketball, and they sort of get you focusing on how many times they've passed the ball, the basketball. And at the end of it, they say, did you notice the gorilla? And then they sort of play it back, and they show a gorilla dancing through the... it's somewhere on YouTube anyway, because you're so focused on this ball being thrown. Okay, you delete that. So distortion could be, okay, in sport, we distort the opposition sometimes. We see the opposition as being like, a lot better than what they are. Maybe bigger than what they are. Maybe, really... much more faster, much more. It's like I was with an athlete one time, and every time he would sprint 100 meters, 80 meters, he'd distort the people he was running against as being bigger and feet pounding down. And it's like going for an interview. Sometimes if you're nervous about the interview, you might distort the person who's interviewing you. And it's like, say, for example, I don't know, I used to work for someone years ago. It was in sport as well. He was a football manager. He was quite notorious for ruling with an iron fist, and you had this sort of image of him type thing. You had this image of him, and it wasn't until I went into his office and he had pictures of his children in there, and I saw a different side to him. I thought he is a human being, so to speak. But the thing is, we do distort things, like presenting in front of a group. We might see ourselves slurring our words and bumbling and so on and so forth. So, but to a point, distortion can be useful too, because we can distort things in a positive way. Even in sport, you can distort things, even in life in general, interviewing. But also, if you take this room, for example, you've got a fire exit. Okay, the health and safety person would have distorted. There's never been a fire in here. Touch wood, there never is. But ultimately, apart from the bonfire they've got outside, the distortion being that, okay, we need somewhere to go out in case they need to get out of the building, so to speak. And same when you stop at a traffic light or give way sign, you have the capacity, in a positive way, to distort what could happen. So someone could give someone a message. If I gave one person in the group a message and got you to relay it on, would it be the same message at the end of it, do you think? Precisely, it'd be different, distorted completely. A song as well is quite interesting. Say, you might have heard a song, and I don't know, anything like me, sometimes I hear a song and I'll make meaning to it, and then I realise they're not the lyrics. The lyrics are different. And then the whole thing changes. It's a whole different ballgame. So what I thought the song was about at one point, years later, because I misunderstood the lyrics, is different as well. So we generalise too, and generalisation is quite useful to a point, because it's economical. You require small amounts of energy per cell in the brain to generalise. It's economical, easy access. You'll generalise many things this morning, and it's a good thing you don't have to relearn these things. So don't rush out and see it, but you've ever seen the film 50 First Dates? Okay, so in this film here, putting it in a nutshell, boy meets girl, falls in love with girl. She has a brain injury, I think. It was a brain injury, if memory serves me correct. Don't rush out and see it, but her short-term memory is gone. And every day, he's got to show her a video of what she did the day before. She's got to relearn love, relearn to make a cup of tea, relearn to do all functionality. So if you didn't generalise, you'd be like Drew Barrymore in the film. She's got to relearn everything from the day before. So generalisation can be a useful thing in that respect, because you generalise, you can make a cup of tea, coffee, drive. Okay, it's economical. You can sort of run that in a part of the brain and just cruise along, so to speak. Where it becomes an issue, generalisation, is where we start to generalise about ourselves, others, the world, in a way that's limiting. So I'm not good enough, I'll never amount to this, these people are that, those people are this, the world is that. So it can get in the way of you going from A to B. Generalisation can be a useful thing, but it can also be a negative thing too. So after we delete, distort, and generalise information, we have a further set of filters, okay, to screen information, and that consists of language, okay, the way we speak to ourselves and others. So think about for a moment, what does the word success mean to you? The word love mean to you? Now, you don't have to give us an answer, so to speak, but think about the way you've answered that. If I asked 100 people in a room, do you think they'd all have the same definition of success? It'd be different. Love would be different. So language is influential in our filters. Memories are different. Meta programs are like software applications for the brain. We go into that in more detail in the course. Unconscious level of awareness. Decisions, attitudes, values, beliefs. Okay, so the filters we have. So we have different memories of a situation. Different, maybe in a situation where if you've got like maybe a sibling or a friend, and you recall a situation in years gone by different to them. They sort of saw it differently. Okay. Memories, maybe you put your hand in fire and you built a schema, an association, and you don't put your hand back there again. Okay. Memory, it could be you had a dog like that as a 5-year-old, your best friend, loving, and then when you see a similar type of dog, you sort of run over and stroke it. Or you could have been attacked by a dog like that as a 5-year-old, and you built a schema that the dog is dangerous. Or maybe you had no experience of a dog like that, you're more neutral. Who's right, who's wrong, what's fact, what's opinion? It all comes down to, I guess, your belief to a point. Meta programs. One meta program, for example, we'll cover these in more details on the course, is direction filter. So we move towards a positive experience, so pleasure, away from pain. So some people exercise because they want to move towards the six-pack on the beach, they want to move towards the body, the wedding dress, and some to go away from the pain, the consequences of not exercising. One is not going away from pain is not seen as negative, it's just the fuel that burns your fire. So someone might exercise because they've been told there's health risks to not exercising, and that might be the driver. There is a spectrum, and we don't follow one or the other. We're somewhere sort of in between where this is concerned, and other meta programs too. It's not a way of pigeonholing people. We are not one thing or the other, and it's very context dependent. That's another story for another day. We go back to it. Decisions we've made in our life influence us as well too. So we never want to judge a decision immediately. Sometimes certain things that we decide to do don't make sense at the time, but they do make sense in the future. So you wouldn't be where you are today if it wasn't certain things in your life in the past. Okay, attitudes to certain things. And we might have a certain attitude to mental health, to coaching, to school. Attitude has a big impact on how we screen information too. Okay, values and beliefs. Well, it's just our reality. A value in this context being what's important to us, what we value. Okay, you could make the point that all the world's conflicts, to a point, involve people's values and beliefs. Okay, value might be freedom. So what is freedom anyway? A belief might be things should be a certain way. Okay, one might have a belief about themselves, about others, about the world, about the future. That impacts their decisions. It impacts what comes into, and the way the information comes in is processed. Okay, so one could believe they are a great coach. One could believe that they create value in people's lives, and behind that sort of behaviour is a belief. One could believe otherwise. One could believe that the students don't want to learn. One could believe the students do want to learn. Has a big impact on the way we approach a certain situation. That's not a filter we have. The beliefs are a filter as well. And after we generalise, we talked about the other filters that we go through. And at that point, we create an internal representation. So a bit like the cartoon image in our mind. The internal representation is a picture, a feeling, a sound of the event we're processing. So like that sort of cartoon. Now, if we sort of hold this thought, and I'm sort of throwing a lot of information out there for you to process at this point, it will all make sense very shortly about how instrumental the model is in helping people create change. Because we can create change in various areas of the model as well. What we pay attention, we tend to get more of. Okay, which we'll go on talk about as we go along. What you believe, you're going to see more of it. The confirmation bias that you'll have, perceptual biases that we have as well. Okay, this information is filtered into our own internal representation systems, and we talked about that being the sights, the sounds, the smells we associate with the data coming in. So okay, you might be given a piece of news. You might go to work on Monday and they say, well, we're making redundancies. You know, what does one do in that situation? What's their reaction? Well, it's all variable depending on their filters. Okay, someone breaks up in a relationship. It's all variable based on their, of course, circumstances, but also their filters. Okay, I guess sort of, we'll touch on this shortly anyway, but the internal representation then gives rise to emotions, our states, and physiology. Okay, so the internal rep, so the person goes into the to work on Monday morning, they've been told they've been made redundant, and they can think, oh no, it's the end of the world, what am I going to do? I'm going to end up in the street, and they have an image of themselves on the streets, living on a van by the river, with a bowl out there for money and no food, but the other person might think, well, actually, you know what? I've lost a job before and I've got one in the past, and they might think differently, and they might see themselves applying for jobs. They might be proactive in their behaviour. So the state is influenced by the internal representation that we have. Okay, and that links to our physiology. So can you tell, how does someone sit when they're sad? How does one sit when they're happy? The two are linked together. The state, the representation gives rise to emotion, okay, and things will change really, really quick. So for example, how would one feel, do you think, if they were told they'd won £1 million in the lottery? Yeah, it might influence their state. They might sort of see themselves spending the money, travelling on a yacht, excited. They might be punching the air, great, but that can change. What if ultimately, then in the afternoon, they got news that one of their loved ones was diagnosed with a terminal condition? Then that would change again. The focus could change, the internal rep could change. No money in the world, okay, would probably be as valuable as it was a few hours earlier, to a point. So things can change, and it has a knock-on effect to our physiology. So the states are expressed through our physiology. Okay, and think about it. We can do a small experiment if you don't mind. And sort of, if you were to sort of adopt a physiology of, and our biochemistry can be linked to our physiology. I mean, it's difficult to be unhappy if you sort of, yay, and I'm not suggesting that to walk the street and say, yay, life's a better roses, be Pollyanna, but it does go to show that one can influence the other. And certainly in the work I do with people who've got like anxiety, obviously I mentioned earlier, if someone's got anxiety, I would tell them to go see someone, maybe a medical person first, because I'm not a medical person, because it could be a biological factor they can help them with. But all things being said and done, and we can work with the person, we can work on their breathing. They breathe deeper, and by breathing deeper through the tummy, you calm the sympathetic nervous system down, and the parasympathetic kicks in. The sphincter muscles relax automatically, the heart rate comes down, because the body knows what to do. Imagine walking up a hill. What happens to your heart rate walking up a hill? It speeds up automatically to pump more blood into the legs. The heart rate goes up. So the body knows what to do. If we give it a chance to do it, we can also influence the body as well, physiologically, to change our state. So one way to change our state is using our physiology. Okay? So someone sitting like that would tell you they're probably not. And if you were to sit like that for, say, a few minutes, you'd probably pick up that sort of state. Okay? And, you know, if you were sort of to sit like this, and you'd probably pick up on that. Okay? It would more than likely influence your state. So we can work on that. They look like pretty happy. They're arguing over who should watch that football decision we talked about earlier.
See, I've had not that situation, but the situation sort of the whole wake up thing in the morning and getting out of bed at this time of year, because it's quite cold and grim. And I know that I don't need to get up until it's, you know, there's a few things that I need to do. Get little boy off to school run, but once I've done that, then my day starts. So my day is pretty much, but he wakes up super early. So it's great because we'll do stuff, but there's some mornings that I'm just thinking, oh, I don't need to, his dad's downstairs, it's fine, I don't need to get up yet. But I know that I would so benefit if I was just able to
and I think
have that extra hour to myself.
Yeah, for sure.
So I watched a video this morning completely by accident on YouTube. It was about the 5-second rule.
Okay. Well, getting up in the morning, when we get up in the morning, I think it's really important from the mind point of view, because that's when we're in a state of awareness. We sort of go through that sort of alpha state where we're quite receptive. So input in is going to have a big impact on our subconscious for sure. I would certainly go so far to say in the morning, it's like in the evening, if you watch a scary film, you're probably going to have a bad dream. But I would say in the morning is a good time to feed the mind with some good stuff, for sure. I wouldn't recommend watching the news in the morning and reading the paper. And the thing is, I think for me, definitely the morning is a great time to feed the mind. Because it's like a song you hear in the morning, you can't get out of your head, it really sits in the unconscious, so the critical factor's down. So certainly another story for another day, but I think for me, it's like, you get up in the morning, and today was a beautiful morning, and you look outside, and I went for a walk and thought, fabulous, fantastic, it's amazing. And I think for me, we sort of touch on that. It's about our perception, our appraisal of the situation. You know, we live in a great country. In the UK, you've got plenty of opportunity out here to do a lot of things that you want to do. So it's our beliefs, our perception, our filters of a situation is going to be key. And I know someone somewhere would give anything to be in the situation that we're probably into. So I think it's a great point you made there, and I think it sort of illustrates this sort of model to a point. But of course, definitely, you know, at times you get up in the morning and you've got aches and pains, and that's a given, for sure.
When you was talking there about sort of being in a certain state and that state making you feel a certain way, it kind of brought to mind for me that thing of being under the covers and feeling warm and not wanting to change myself.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's kind of easy to stay as you are.
Yeah.
But then I'd heard about the 5-second rule, and it seems to work. The whole thing of counting down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. She did talk a bit more technically about how the brain works and sort of how the counting down thing helps.
Yeah.
But actually, I was like, wow, it does work.
No, yeah, very much so. Well, you know, and the output we receive, the data received, and then we have a behaviour. So the end product of all that is a behavioural response. So the person could go into work and be told you've been made redundant on a Monday morning, and all things being equal, if they've got like £1 billion in the bank, they're probably not going to be as bothered as someone who's, you know, struggling to pay their bills. But all things being equal, it's the appraisal of the situation that's going to have a big impact on their behaviour, the way it's processed. Because one person could go into social avoidance, one person could be withdrawn, one person could become the victim. This always happens to me, and it might happen to them. It may have happened to them more than other people. But the key thing is okay, one person might decide, you know what, an opportunity here. They might not be jumping for joy, saying, great, I'm being redundant. It might be, you know what, I have lost a job before, I've got a new one, and maybe it's a chance to move forward. So that's a big thing for me. You get up in the morning, how do we see it? Do we do a gratitude list, go for a walk? Are we grateful to be alive, to be given a day, a blessing? Every day, do we see it as a given right or a gift? So they're sort of key things, and that's going to impact our behaviour, our mindset. So we do behaviourally has a big impact. So all things that we go on in life, the things that we experience in life, and life being the way it is, these filters are critical. Our internal representations are critical. So you can make changes. We talk about ways to make changes, the way we can perceive an event internally for a representation. So we can alter those. So we you know, it takes a moment's turbulence in the plane. So you get up in the morning, and you sort of got an interview, and you're rushing around, and you wake up late, you spill coffee over yourself, you get caught up in a traffic jam, and your beliefs about the day can change really, really quickly. But equally, why should it take a long time to reverse that? Okay, so we can alter our the internal representation we've got of maybe flying in a plane. It might be okay if someone's afraid of flying. It might be they might see the plane flames and screaming, and someone who enjoys flying might feel is a good chance to watch a few films, look outside the window, think about the destination. So we can sort of work on that. We can work on the filters, the beliefs people have. So the things that we can do that we talk about, we'll talk about more as we go along, that can make a big change, and there's a big change. So from the point of view of therapy, all therapy is about, from the maladaptive to more adaptive. From the point of view of coaching is, one would say, so if someone receives coaching, they could be the best athlete in the world, but they get coached to be the best they can be. They could be the best presenter in the world, but they get coached to be the best they can be. So they've got a goal in mind. So behaviour is goal-directed to a point. So for me, the output we're sending out there is our behaviour. So you know, the output of all that, long and short of it, is the behaviour, which I'll talk about that as we go along. But these things happen really, really quickly. They happen so fast that it's almost outside the conscious awareness. Okay, I'm just conscious of people being blinded by the sun there. Okay. We have a beautiful sun coming through. Okay, so these moments happen so quickly. By using a model, you can have some insight and awareness how you process from the outside world, which we'll go into more detail as we go along. The more aware you are, more self-aware, your filters. The process, the 12 million, the 134, what you choose, what you delete, distort, generalize, how you internally represent that situation. As a result, what state do you go into, physiology, behavior, okay? Behavior change, breaking out of patterns to see possibilities. Okay, we get stuck in these patterns. Some people repeat the same patterns. I was doing some mediation a few weeks ago with someone, and they seem to be repeating the same patterns they've repeated for many, many years. The same pattern, the same generalization. Okay? The same pattern. So we can examine the thought. Okay? We can examine what our thought process is as well. We can interrupt a pattern and look at ways to disconnect that pattern, dissociate from the pattern. Okay? So dissociating being, let's get the pattern, whatever it is. Dissociate. So you've got bad food in the fridge, it contaminates all the other food. We take it out of the fridge. And we've stocked the fridge up with different food. Okay? What you practice, you get more of. Neuroplasticity. Okay? If you practice being angry, you're going to get good at being angry. Practice worry, you're going to get better because you're building connections in the brain. You can break that. You practice being happy, being grateful, you'll raise your defaults in that area. You can change your behavior or how you react to events coming in. A reappraisal. Okay, so I could walk at lunchtime and see, let's say you were walking at lunchtime at the shop, and on the high street you see a really good friend of yours who you had a bit of a fallout a week before, and they walk straight past you. What might your appraisal of that situation be? Well, the appraisal might be, they're not talking to me no more. So you're processing and thinking, oh no, they're not talking to me anymore, they're not my friend no more. And then your internal representation is, this person is not my friend, I'll never speak to them again, I'm going to send them a text, why the hell did you not say it? And so on and so forth. And then you go into states, a rage, unresourceful states. In your physiology, you come back in a classroom like this, I say, you okay? No, my friend's not talking. Okay, and then behaviorally, you sort of text them saying, you scumbag, why don't you say that? But the reality is that, okay, we change our appraisal. I might say, well, did they see you? They might have something on their mind. They might have blamed you, but you're not in control of that. But equally, we change our appraisal situation to, okay, they might not have seen you. Then through that, you realise, the logical thing to do, send them a text. Are you okay? Did you see me? And that would be the logical thing to do. Okay, but we don't always think logically. Okay? So you can change your behaviour and to react to events coming in. Cognitive science will suggest that emotions occur in response to subjective appraisal situations. So an ambiguous situation, for example, a threatening situation could be an email coming in. It could be a text coming in. It could be your boss saying they want to talk to you about something. It could be your partner saying we need to talk. Okay? So it's an appraisal, what goes through our mind. Okay? Initially interpreted negatively, and it can instigate a cascade of subjective feelings. Neuroresponsible, bodily changes, and behaviours that are consistent with fear. Depending upon reappraisal, the dangerous, ambiguous situation is not actually as dangerous and could reduce the set of fear responses. So the person who wants to talk about something, the boss who calls you in the office, the friend doesn't say hello, because we sort of inherit from our ancestors a bias towards threat, because our survival of the species is paramount. So in years gone by, if you go into a town, a new place you haven't been before, you'd come back and talk about what you saw in that town, the dangers, the stories. It's storytelling creatures, human beings, and in the narrative we've got the cognitive distortion. So if you go there, And I mentioned this before, a bit like going to 10 stores at Christmas time. 9 treat you well, give you a discount, look after you. 1 shortchange you. The person the store you go back home and talk about is the one that gives you a negative experience. Okay? So really, when you think about it, how many things in the world that we live in today, they're not really dangerous? Falling behind on the bill, not doing something at work, or making a mistake, it's not dangerous to a point. Okay? And the way we react is not always in proportion to what the situation is. Okay? Our perception of events only perceive other people as events are, from our own point of view, our own filters and screens. We've all got our own reality. All of us, each and every one of us. Our filters are as unique as our thumbprint. You know, you're sculpted by all your experiences, and the biology has an impact on us, as well as our psychology and social circumstances. As we've talked about before, and sort of reinforced the external event, filters, generalization, deletion, distortion, generalization, filters language, memories, decisions, values, beliefs, meta programs. Then we go into internal representation, see, hear, feel the picture, the cartoon over the head of the person, and then that elicits a state, a physiology, gives rise to that, and then we have a behavior. Okay, and many filters, by the way, are formed between 0 and 7. Okay, the one point they used to say, the child is father to the man. If you believe it, it is true. And why 0 to 7? Because that's when you're most susceptible. Because when the baby's born, and
we talk about age now.
The filters, most of them are developed between 0 and 7.
7 years old.
Well, our values and beliefs, for the most part, yeah, for sure. You could say that between 0 and 7 years of age, when our filters are raw, and imagine the world in the eyes of the baby. The baby takes a breath. The baby experiences, it's warm in the womb. The baby's born, experiences a coldness, and it breathes automatically, automatic function. But in the eyes, it sees faces. It hears sounds, has feelings, and things that I've never experienced before. But gradually along the way, the baby develops a set of filters. And who influences the baby? The values, the beliefs, the memories it has, the experiences. And for the most part, up to a certain age, the baby's working at an unconscious level. And it comes out at the unconscious level. Because the baby has no manual. You don't give the baby an instruction manual to walk, to talk. Okay, and how long do you give the baby to walk? The baby will take as long as it needs to walk. So the baby subconsciously, unconsciously, and builds the reaction. And if you look at conditioning, classical conditioning, you can go as far back as, say, the Watson-Rayner experiment in the 20s. And Watson and Rayner elaborated on the Pavlovian experiments. Pavlov dog, the bell rings, salivation of the dog, and they take away the food, they ring the bell, the dog salivates. The Pavlovian experiments that they did, Watson and Rayner, now this experiment wouldn't be ethically do it now, but in the 20s they did. What they did, cutting a long story short because of time, they gave the baby at 9 months they tested for any fears or phobias. It didn't have any other than loud noise and falling. And then they gave the baby a white rat, tame white rat. And the baby would stroke it 11 months and everything else was nice. And eventually what they did, what's around, they would get a hammer and make a big loud noise behind the baby, and the baby would eventually associate the loud noise to the white rat was holding, until eventually that fear extended to other fluffy animals that looked the same. Okay, that experiment wouldn't be able to be done now psychologically, ethically, and that experiment you take out of what it will, but that experiment did lead to operant conditioning. It did lead to the understanding of desensitization. It did lead to a lot of things that we do now. But what we take out of it is that, okay, we're born in the world. So the observational learning, we look at Bandera experiments where they took the Bobozole experiment and they threw groups of adults So the children were exposed to in groups. So one group of children were exposed to adults playing with these dolls lovingly. One were exposed to adults being aggressive to them. One were exposed to adults that were neutral. And they found that the incidence levels on the children exposed to the aggression mimicked the aggression. So from the point of view of observational learning, so if you see a parent jump in the air when they see the spider, you may have a conditioned response. Okay, now that might be a justified action in some parts of the world. Where I grew up, spider, you sort of have a stick and poke it away. Here, spider, people sometimes let it on the hand. When I first came in and saw people, that there'd be a spider in the room, they'd put it on a piece of paper. I'm like, you joking? On a piece of paper to take it out of the room? Okay, I'm sorry to upset any animal conservationists here, but I'm like, kill or be killed, dude. You're going away. Okay, because I'm told from an early age to check your shoes, to check your bedding. Okay, there's these things called redbacks and funnel worms that you don't want them anywhere near you. So that's a conditioned response. So I reconditioned myself. But whenever I do go back to country where spiders are dangerous, I've got to put my head back on, my caution head, as you do. But the world's for the eyes of the baby. Okay, so we learn on our little journey. Carl Jung.
So is that to say then that there's something like quite difficult then about undoing some of those forces that have developed in a child?
Great question.
When you talk about trauma and things like that.
Great question. That's a great question. Nicola, really, really good question indeed. I think for me it's all individualised. I think it's an individual case formulation. It can be, it might not be. So for me, each individual, you create a map of their internal representation to the experience. You have a goal in mind, what they want to achieve. You work towards that goal. You can look at the various filters we've covered and see how the filters relate to that experience. But equally, if you're on a plane and you hit a bit of turbulence and then you have a fear, then why should it take a long time to desensitize? So my thoughts would be treat everyone individually and have a goal in mind and have an open mind. I've certainly done help people who've got phobia and used the phobia release technique, and I've helped them rapidly. I did that on the radio. You probably heard that. You may not have heard that when I did the radio for a while. It can happen. My hypothesis would be under extreme stress, the person's fear or phobia could come back. And depending on the trauma as well, and the reaction to trauma. Because, trauma could be fighting in a war. Trauma could be domestic violence. Trauma could be abandonment. So I think for me, each individual you would treat differently. But we can have the belief that we can make changes. For me, I think it's really important to, from a therapeutic point, to push people as much as they can tolerate. It's not sink or swim. Extend the comfort zone and be sensible about that, because I think for me, in my mind, get a map of their reality, have a goal in mind, and use whatever intervention is necessary to get to that goal and help guide them there. So, there are some people that say, I can do this and I can do that. I would always err on the side of caution, okay, in that respect. I think coaching is different to therapy in the sense that, coaching could be business, could be sport. When we sort of go into the world of therapy, there are things that we need to consider as well, from a biological point of view, from a psychological point of view, from a sociological point of view. There are things that we need to take into consideration as well. I remember once a lecturer saying on that subject, and I don't want to I haven't got too much time to go into it, but I remember once who was it now? Which lecturer was I was sitting in the lecture one time, and I can't remember who it was now. I don't remember who it was, but I can recall a lecturer telling me that one time he was saying that in World War II in England, London experienced the Blitz, and during the Blitz, some children were moved to the beautiful English countryside in safety, away from their parents. And I'm pretty sure he said that the children who moved away had suffered more trauma than the ones with their parents, the Blitz. So in view of that, I would say that there are parts of the brain in severe trauma that probably aren't working the way they should be and could be, and you would deal with everyone individually. So in that respect, like I mentioned about the mindfulness, mindfulness is based on 4,000-year-old traditions. To drop it into the world that we live in today is idealistic. We need to take it what we will. I love mindfulness. I think adapting it is key to the environment we live in. But mindfulness might not be right for someone with trauma because they've got nowhere to run out of their mind. Fight, flight, freeze response. So I think with all these things, they are modelled. Nothing is panacea. Okay, and I'll cover other models on the course as well. Nothing's 100%. They're models, they're useful, and we take out of them what we will. But I think from an individual point of view, it can help us in our assessments of someone and can help us to choose interventions and where to use interventions. But equally, it's not the be-all end-all. Hopefully, that sort of gives some light. But I will touch on that as more as we go along. A bit more to cover. So Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, perception is projection. So his hypothesis was all that irritates us about someone else can lead us about understanding ourselves. Okay, so that's Carl Jung. The person think about the person you've got most negative emotions about. Carl Jung would say, according to Carl Jung, it's a projection of self. So it's so unconscious, you're not conscious of it. That was Carl Jung, not me. Don't throw the book at me if you can think of your worst enemy now and your feelings. That's not a projection of me. Have a go. I mean, he's not around anymore, Carl Jung, but that's a hypothesis. And he says that it's so unconscious, okay, that we're not consciously aware of it. So you notice in someone else to get the learnings and change. So the person, for example, you, for whatever reason, stirs certain emotions, you're projecting self. And that's giving you an idea of what to change about yourself, okay? The idea that the unconscious mind brings up problems for resolution, helps us grow and evolve, okay? That's one hypothesis. So perception is projections. So anyone out there who's got an issue with me, you're projecting. I'm not the issue, you're projecting. So any of you guys, anyone watching the stream, if you've got any issues around me, it's a projection of yourself.
So is that like when Dean says to me, you are so like your mum? And I'm like, I'm like my mum, I'm not like my mum.
Yeah. So, whatever you're upset about that person, reflection on yourself at an unconscious level. That was one hypothesis. I suppose the long and short of it is, for me, without being too deep and meaningful about it, what I would say, where it's quite useful, is how we project onto our staff and students and clients. Okay? I mentioned earlier when I worked in care homes, in education, I said in care homes and education, they were doing ASDAN awards. Okay? I said, they're not doing ASDAN on my watch when I'm teaching. Well, who are you to tell us what to do? They're not doing it. They're going to go for GCSE and A-level. Are you out of your mind? Jimmy, out of your mind? They can't do that. Some can't even, no, they're going to go for it. And I decided that they can do it. So I believe they could do it. And the reason I believe that is that when I was 14, 15, I struggled academically. I struggled to read and write. I struggled to read. I didn't even know what a noun or a verb was until I was 23. I didn't know the alphabet. But I still managed to write 3 best-selling books, The 10 Resource Manual. I decided to brag. The reality is that I taught myself to do it. And I've had a lifelong academia. I'm even learning now. I'm still in academia now. I'm learning at one of the most prestigious institutions in the world now. Learning. And I carry on learning. And the projection of self. And that's where it's useful. Now, what do you believe about your staff as a manager? About your clients as a coach? About the students as a teacher? Is instrumental. Now, I'm not saying that it's not challenging. I'm not saying there were times when I used to work in care it wasn't frustrating. I'm not saying there were times in sport and I thought, okay, can we really do it? Of course. But the key thing being, what we project onto, if I told you we were going to teach grade A students, you'd project differently to what you would if you were told they were like, really unruly, and vice versa. So I know there's a fine line between balance, competence, confidence. If someone said to me, I've never flown a plane before, I want to fly a plane to America, then it probably wouldn't be a good idea to do that. So I think for me, yeah, for sure, we've got to have some sense. I know there are coaches out there now saying, I believe in my clients, they can do anything. Well, I doubt very much, in my opinion, if someone's never picked up a golf club before, they're going to be a world champion overnight. But who am I to say otherwise? Well, I would say, if I can't help If I don't believe I can help a client, then I won't take them on. So go to someone else who is probably better to work with you. I won't run on their parade because I've worked with people over many, many years who've surprised many people in sport, business and life. And I supported them. But to tell you the truth, there's been people who've come to see me and I felt their goal, my projection, better off seeing someone else. And that's me being honest with you. I'm being honest about that. And I think for me, our projection is key. So from the Jung point of view, think about, and you can do, and look at the limiting beliefs that you might have that you're passing on to other people. Okay? Am I limiting them? And that's a really important one. As a coach, therapist, teacher, limit their clients by your beliefs. As parents, we do it. And we wouldn't be human if we didn't do it. And that's quite useful from that point of view, I think anyway. Okay. We're going to go through a few more things before we sort of break to think about. So we have a perceptual bias. We do not perceive the world passively as it is. We notice, remember, things which our brain marks as important, top-down modulation. So our perception filters only a small fraction of the environmental stimuli. We remember a small portion of it and fill in the missing gaps of assumptions to cause pattern completion. Okay. One thing to consider, is emotions code the meaning of events. Thus, emotional loaded memories are strongest and hardest to change. That's memory consolidation, which you made a great point earlier. So, for example, sort of come down to the slide as you do, and the example being for sure, if you suffer severe trauma, if something had happened to you, you got attacked while walking down. So cognitively, you might not recall the situation where you saw, heard, felt, but emotionally. So someone might cry about they fought in the war 60 years ago. It brings them to tears emotionally. They might not recall cognitively what they saw, but emotionally. So if you went on holiday last year, a day after you went away, you're going to recall the memory better than what you recall it now, but the emotion. If you broke up on holiday, it might feel the same as it felt then, if not similar, or could feel worse. So they're harder ones. We have also cognitive biases as well. Our understanding of the world is inevitably biased. So you're going to see the world based on your own perception of reality. And example might be, people on Facebook, they'll like a post that fits into their belief. If they don't like it within a second, they probably won't like it at all. Okay? But they won't like a post that doesn't fit into their way of seeing. And I mentioned before, so I was working with this woman one time, and she was a model, and she was really struggling with herself, and she was sort of going into some negative patterns of behaviour. And what it was, she went into modelling, she said, because she wanted to sort of prove that she was attractive in the eyes of corporation. She believed she was ugly. So she was told she was ugly at a young age, and that stuck inside her brain by someone influential in life. And so 100 people say you look really well. She'd delete that. So one person might say, I don't like the colour of your shoes, and she'd ruminate over that, because that would fit into the reality. Okay, even though bias is very individual due to different wirings of the brain and shaped by different experience, some biases are common and can predict it. So you've got, say, I suppose you could say, okay, it's almost like the herd mentality. So from the point of view of our best chance of survival is to fit into a group. We've inherited that as well. So in years gone by, we used to have tribes. Your best chance of survival is to be in a tribe, because if you got rejected from the tribe, your chance of survival will be a lot less. So now we still have that same sort of mentality to a point. So we form these sort of collective biases against people, politicians, against other countries, against other situations, the way we're influenced by the media. Our expectations can form bias. What we expect. Our beliefs modulate our perception in order to find the evidence to support our model of the world. So you're watching a TV, a football match, there's a penalty, so you're going to find ways to modulate your perception of that experience, the evidence. You're going to say, well, that referee, he's given us not one decision. Horrible. Well, the manager's never done this for us, so okay, you've never done this, and so on and so forth. The confirmation bias, what we see, okay, what we see, we always find what we search for. Okay, so the woman I mentioned before, the confirmation bias was, okay, see, I told you so. So 100 people say you look really, really well, and one person says, I don't like the colour of your shoes, I told you so, because it reinforces the way, her biased way of thinking. Okay? And sometimes people can have that cognitive dissonance, where people are given information that causes that sort of ouch. It sort of sparks their belief system. It creates that sort of leverage, that seed of doubt. Well, actually, you know what? I believe this, and you're saying that. Okay? So the confirmation bias is, we'll see what we look for. We're going to, okay, and that goes across a broad level of area from a belief point of view. So, okay, if you believe a certain town centre is dangerous, then you're going to come back and say, well, this is what happened. You're going to ignore the wonderful park, the friendly people, okay, and so on and so forth. Familiarity bias. So there's certain people on TV, certain film stars that we sort of gravitate to, and we see them in other films, so we become familiar. The brain likes familiarity. The brain, and think about it, if you were sort of stuck in a foreign country where you couldn't speak the language, no passport, no money, you'd probably go into a state of, the brain likes, and you see it, where people move to certain countries, they sort of live alongside people from the same culture as them. So in Italy, you used to have the little, in New York, you used to have the Little Italy. In communities in this country, you've got, ethnic groups and so on and so forth. So different logo, the value bias. So our brain is constructing the model of the world. Perception is almost like top-down modulated with multiple factors. We've talked about beliefs, expectations, context as well. I think the thing as well to bear in mind is that what we mentioned earlier, so you've got this constant stream of information coming in. You're only going to select a certain amount of information to take on board, so the perceptual and cognitive bias are inevitable. It's impossible not to be biased. Okay? Even knowing about it doesn't make us unbiased. Being aware of it. Now you're probably aware of some of your own biases. We cannot change the function of our brain, but we can through update our model of the world with new information. Okay, so we can give people an experience. Okay, so we might be biased about a certain situation, but we're exposed to a similar situation, we experience, and we see the world differently. Okay, with new information. These biases are vital, by the way, for survival and functioning in the world. If you didn't have biases, you wouldn't survive in the world. So they are vital, we've inherited them, but they're not always useful. And we'll look at ways to change. Because memories aren't fixed. Okay? Memories are your interpretation of those information coming in. And one of the things I do, and I'm going to touch on this course, is we can reappraise situations in the past. Because at that point in your life, your appraisal will be different to the appraisal that you would have now. The resources you've got now. And memory is not being fixed. You can almost like water memory down and alter the perception of reality. So the emotion you feel once you sort of talk to your friend or coach about your friend who didn't say hello is different to what it was when you thought that the person blanked you. Okay? Neurons that fire together wire together. That's the important thing too. And if you ever get a chance to read Dan Goleman, I think it's Dan Goleman, the book he wrote about the emotional hijacking. So the part of the brain, the neocortex, literally gets hijacked under extreme stressful situations where, okay, if you're exposed to a lot of stress, then you're not functioning logically as well. So it makes sense to sort of look at that and work on that. But what I want to do before we sort of break for lunch is talk about go a bit deeper with this. And we're going to touch on this more after lunch, and we're going to apply various models to this after lunch. So according to the cognitive psychologist George A. Miller, in 1956. He wrote a paper in 56, George A. Miller, a psychological review. I believe it's one of the most cited papers of all time. I don't know if that's true. I'm relying on what Wikipedia said. But equally, whether it is or it's not, he talks about the magical number 7. And that is our limited capacity of short-term memory. In the paper, he talked about the magical 7. We can only process plus 7 minus 2. In plain English, we can only process 5 to 9 pieces of information in any given period of time. This is all in the manual too, by the way, and you can sort of revert back over this if you want to, any given time, consciously. Okay? And that's quite important because think about what it was when you first learned to drive. First gear, second gear, stall, okay? And now you get in, it's an unconscious competence. Okay, you can sort of cruise along, go somewhere new, you've got to sort of, might need to sat nav or readjust the surroundings. But generally speaking, that's really important because the way we give information and the way we structure it is crucial to think that consciously we can only process 5 to 9 pieces. And that's on a good day. It's probably, the reality is, someone like me can only probably process 3 if I'm lucky. I think anyway, it's a limiting belief, but there you go. And you might be thinking now, well, what about my waiter? I'm mind reading now. My waiter or waitress, how they can take more than 9 items without thinking? Well, that's important because it depends how you define an item. Okay, so what we do is we call organizational encoding. Okay, we can think of an item as being a single item or a group of items. So the waiter or waitress is more than likely used the organizational encoding. And the way to explain that would be, if I was to give you 10 numbers randomly, it'd probably be difficult to recall the numbers I gave you. If I give you a list of things that I wanted you to buy for me at lunchtime, without telling you, writing them down, 20 things, it's going to be hard to recall those 20 things. So this reverses the way we code information. And this sort of impacts the numbers of items we're actually recording. So if I gave you 15 digits at once, if I said, okay, 1, 3, 2, 9, 7, and it's going to be hard to recall all those in that order. But if I, for example, gave you 15 digits and said, okay, 7, 7, 7, 7, 6, 6, 6, 6, 5, 5, 5, 5, there'd be a pattern recognition. You'd probably recall that. So the way you're organising it and seeing the pattern, you're not recalling 15 digits. What you are recalling is 3 chunks, or maybe 4. 4, because 7, 7, 7, 7, 6, 6, 6, 6, 5, 5, 5, 5, and the chunk of coding it, the pattern. So you can say 4 chunks. And so the waiter, for example, or the waitress might be first course, second course, third course, dessert. And in their own mind, there might be subcategories to the first course. And the first course is 3 choices. And the second course, does that sort of make sense? Okay. And the reason why it's important that if you look at the way we used to, the phones, the way we'd sort of chunk our phone numbers numerically, postcodes, okay, the way they were grouped in numerical value. Now it's a bit different. Mobile phones are a bit longer now, but we still chunk them. And the way we chunk is quite interesting, really, because the way I sort of say my phone number is different to the way people say it in this country and in other countries, because you're kind of influenced by people around you. I break my number down in different chunks. So someone says to me, what's your phone number? They're like, well, they can't get it. But that sort of stems from when I was growing up, the telephone number we used to use, didn't have mobile phones back then, the way I chunk it down. That sort of stayed with me because I chunk things differently. And it's quite fascinating because it sort of throws them off. And think about your phone number. It's in the unconscious, but if you have to consciously recall it, it's there. Why that's important for me is when we give instructions, managers, presentations. So if you're a manager, you give instructions, you want to take into consideration that people can only process so much consciously. If you're a presentation, it might be useful to be aware of that. If you're a coach at half time, doing a team talk, you want your players to do something specific, it might be worth considering that. They can only process so much. So sensory overload, okay, is really important. So we're flooded with a lot of sensory stimulation. We need a mechanism to select parts of the image that's important to us, and the selective mechanism is attention, okay, which is key. I'm mindful of lunch. We're going to pick up on this when we come back after lunch. We'll open up for some questions too and go from there. But the useful thing is we sort of looked at the communication model, and in summary, it's not the event, it's the meaning we give the event. Okay? So it's the meaning we give the event, because if we're going to be very esoteric on a Thursday, nothing means any of the meaning we give it. So the meaning we give the event, and we can understand how we're deleting, distorting, generalizing the information, and we're filtering it through our language, our memories, our meta-programs, our values, beliefs, and decisions, and how we make an internal representation of that, how that's impacting our states, physiology and behaviour, then we can sort of work at various angles. Okay? We can more self-aware. We can break that pattern, and we can bring a new pattern in. We can work on that level. We can work towards our goals. It can be really useful to look at what we're deleting. Okay, look at what we're generalizing, how it's impacting our life. Look at the language you're using, how we're distorting things. Okay, so it could be we see the friend at lunchtime that you fell out with last week mildly and think they're blanking me, and the image you see, they're going to talk to you again, you've lost a best friend. So we can sort of look at reappraisal too, from the point of view of the information that we process consciously. You control your conscious mind, okay? You control your conscious mind in the sense that, okay, if this room was completely dark, depending on where you shine the light is what you'll see, okay? So for me, one example is getting up in the morning and doing a gratitude list. I shine my torch on the gratitude list, what I'm grateful. So even when I have those mornings where I'm like that, I'm like, actually, you know what, there's a lot to be grateful for. And I know that fear and anxiety doesn't survive in a grateful environment. So what can I be grateful for? There's always something to be grateful for, one would think. Whether it's friends, family, being alive, being well, having your senses, knowing someone somewhere in the world would give anything to be where you are, what you have. So they're quite useful to be more consciously aware where you choose to shine your light on. With events coming in, the meaning you give the events. Okay? The situation and your appraisal of the situation. There's been plenty of stories of people who've been in similar environments, and one's gone to one thing, one the other. You know, I think, if memory serves me correct, I mean, Tony Robbins, when I first went to his seminar, I've been to a few of his seminars, but I remember him saying a story in one of his seminars years ago when I saw him the first time at 17. This is my memory. It's a long time since I was 17. I've seen him a few times since then, but I'm pretty sure he said this story when I was 17. He talked about this guy who grew up in an environment with an alcoholic father who I believe was abusive and aggressive. And he said the guy, when he interviewed the guy, this guy would say that the reason he turned out to be similar to his dad, aggressive and alcoholic, was he goes to Tony Robbins. Now, I stand corrected. I'm sure that Tony Robbins fans will email me saying, this is the real story, but the moral of the story was this guy says, how else did you expect him to be? If I had this dad that was alcoholic and aggressive, how else could you expect me to be? So that's a generalizing belief. Okay? And equally, the other guy who had an alcoholic and abusive father became successful in the eyes of society. I believe he opened up a business or became a lawyer. We deem that success. Whatever you deem as success, but in the eyes of society, when Tony Robbins says to him, he goes, how did you do it? He goes, well, how else did you expect it to be? Okay? So ultimately, in the end, when he had the drum roll, these guys apparently were brothers in the same environment. So one reacts one way and one the other. Okay? And one of the key elements to their behaviour and what they would do was their appraisal of the situation. Okay? Which is quite useful. So the story is quite loose. It's been a long time since the story. It's like this epiphany that came to my head then while we're doing the course. So we're going to break for lunch till 1:30. Is that okay for everybody? And then we'll sort of come back and keep going. Thank you. Yeah.